With me on the phone right now is Gary W. Moore. Gary has written a book about Buddy entitled Hey Buddy. Gary, I understand you weren't a fan of Buddy Holly or really rock music in general before this project started.
No, not at all. I kind of grew up in a rock music vacuum as a kid. My father was a big country and western music fan. That's what we listened to at home. When I got into my teen years, I was involved in Drum and Bugle Club, which is kind of a patriotic music type activity, competitive activity that took place at the American Legion in VFW. And of course, the veterans weren't big fans of what was happening in the culture, so they didn't listen to rock and roll there.
Yeah.
And out of high school, got a degree in music education, and went to a college that was a little stuffy, and to play rock and roll there would be blasphemy, so I just kind of missed a whole generation of music.
Oh, so you kind of got to get caught up then.
Well, I am getting caught up, and I'm up to about 1964 and The Who.
Okay. As far as going into that with that type of background, didn't it kind of make it hard to do your research?
Well, not really. I think the most interesting thing for me, I wasn't a rock music fan that was researching other rock music. I was researching a whole genre of music. It was really, I can't say that I was unaware, certainly. I mean, I've heard the Beatles, and you flip through stations and you hear different things, but the music that I didn't understand, music that I didn't appreciate. I really grew up in a conservative background. And so when I found it difficult to separate what was happening in the culture, the kind of the sex, drugs, rock and roll, the war protests, the Weather Underground, the SDS. I really had trouble separating all of that from the music.
Uh-huh.
And so I would, when I would happen across the music, I didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And so, and it's really a shame because it's really about the music, not about what was happening culturally at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what was it about Buddy Holly that sparked your interest in him?
Well, it's a strange thing. A couple of years ago, my mother-in-law, who's apparently much hipper than I am, the only thing she wanted for her 77th birthday is she said she wanted to go to the Winter Dance Party. And I thought, well, Winter Dance Party, this must be Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, she's of that era. And my wife laughed and says, no, this is a reenactment of the last concert at the Surf Ballroom of Buddy Holly, Big Bopper, and Ritchie Valens.
Yeah.
And I just, I had no idea that my mother-in-law, was a rocker, but she was a huge Buddy Holly fan. And so we went to the concert, and the concert was billed as John Mueller's Winter Dance Party. John is a guy who's been traveling around with a couple of other artists that have been recreating this concert now for about 15 years. And watched it, enjoyed it, thought it was great. But even towards the end of the concert, I thought, well, this is not something I'd ever want to do again. I'm glad I got to see it once. But at the very end of the show, John performed a song called Hey Buddy. And it was a song that he had written in tribute to Buddy Holly. And when he announced that he was going to write a song that he had written, I thought, well, this is going to be a train wreck. Here we're at a concert listening to these, original songs by these great artists, and now this guy's going to try to throw in something he's written. And it was the most moving song I've ever heard in my life. It just seized my heart, captured my imagination. It really sent me on a search to learn more about the late, great Buddy Holly.
Have you ever seen the Buddy Holly Story movie with Gary Busey in it?
I had not seen it until, I was aware of it, and I remember Gary Busey had been nominated for an Academy Award, but I'd never seen the movie. And when I started writing this book, my wife brought it home from the rental store. She said, hey, you may want to watch this. And I said, no, I don't want to watch it till I'm finished writing the book because I don't want it to influence me.
Yeah.
And so the night that I sent the book off to my editor, we sat down and watched the Buddy Holly story.
Well, I know the movie makers were kind of liberal with some of the facts. You kind of expect that now with the movies. Any surprises that you came across along the way?
Well, I mean, as far as the movie goes, they were more than liberal. They really changed his personality, changed the nature of his career. And Gary Busey did an amazing job of kind of interpreting Buddy, of imitating Buddy.
Yeah.
But the movie itself, there was really no real correlation between his real life and his real story and the movie. But there were a lot of things, that surprised me along the way. I mean, Buddy Holly, arguably, is the inventor of rock and roll. I mean, you can make a case that he is the guy who really kind of took what was happening with Elvis and Little Richard and this whole group and kind of pulled it into a style and created it. And the artists that you hear today, I mean, you hear a little Buddy Holly in all of them. And the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, they admit, out of their own mouths that they were standing on the shoulders of Buddy Holly.
Yeah.
And so this style of music became, the moniker was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What surprised me was Buddy Holly was the absolute opposite. Buddy was a hardcore, devoted Christian. Didn't believe in premarital sex, so the whole idea of free love and stuff. Buddy would have been opposed to. Buddy did not use drugs. Buddy didn't drink. And so the music that he invented shortly after his death turned into something that I think was the exact opposite of what Buddy Holly, stood for. The other interesting thing is, and this is something that shocked me, I was talking to a couple of Buddy's childhood friends, Gary and Ramona Collett, and they were actually the background singers on That'll Be the Day, Maybe Baby, and a couple of Buddy's hits. And when I was interviewing them, I was talking to them about, what was Buddy like, and they would tell me Buddy Holly factoids and things that, that you can get off the internet. And we went on for about 45 minutes, and I kept saying, but tell me what Buddy was like. And then they would tell me something about his music that I already knew.
Yeah.
And this went on to finally Ramona said, you want to know who Buddy Holly is? I said, well, that's all I want to know. I really do. And she said, let me tell you who Buddy Holly was. And she said, when That'll Be the Day became a hit in 1957, Buddy didn't know that he got royalties. He thought that, he didn't think that he got anything off the record. He thought that, well, he would be able to sell the records at his concert and he'd make some money there. And because the record was out there, he'd book more concerts and more dates. And so when he received his first royalty check, he was shocked. He didn't even know what it was for. And so he received a royalty check, which his very first one, for the very first 6 months of That'll Be the Day, it was in today's dollars equivalent about $36,000. So here's this really kind of blue-collar kid from West Texas. At the time, he was, he would have been 19 years old. Never had anything in his life, and all of a sudden he's presented with a check for $36,000. Now, Ramona said, what do you think he would do with that? And I thought, well, he'd buy a car, he'd take his buddies on a trip, whatever. And she said, that's what you'd think, right? And I said, yeah. And she says, Buddy went to his church, donated the entire amount to his church.
Wow.
So they could buy new pews. And she started crying, and she said, that's who Buddy Holly was.
Huh. I can think back when I was 19, and the car would probably be in top of the list there.
Absolutely.
Well, now everybody, I guess, who's heard of Buddy Holly knows about the plane crash that killed him. Did you plan to get as deep into that as you did?
I didn't plan to get into it at all. I mean, I was interested in it because I'm a veteran pilot. I've been flying for years. In fact, I used to own an air charter service and a flight school. So I was in that business, in that industry for a long time. But I thought, I'm really wanting to write about the man, and I don't want to sensationalize this. And it was a crash. It was a tragedy, but it was a crash. And so I didn't really plan on writing about it. What I was doing, though, is I was trying to find out and talk to as many people as I could that would tell me how Buddy Holly had impacted their life. And so I did want to talk to the folks, the Dwyers, Jerry and Barb Dwyer. They own Dwyer's Flying Service. They're the ones who rented the plane that night for Buddy and sent their 21-year-old pilot, Roger Peterson, on this flight that ended 5 minutes after takeoff in absolute disaster. And I didn't want to talk to them about the crash. All I wanted to do was, how did that impact your life? Because it certainly had to impact theirs.
Yeah.
Well, I tried getting a hold of Jerry and Barb, and they wouldn't return my phone calls. And everybody told me that knew them said they won't call you back. Well, one afternoon, my phone rang. I looked down. It was a Mason City, Iowa call. So I picked up the phone, and Barb was there, that's Jerry's wife, and she said, "Are you the guy trying to get a hold of my husband?" And I said, "Well, that depends on who your husband is." I said, who are you? She says, my name is Barb Dwyer. She said, "My husband's Jerry." And I said, "Oh, yes." I said, "Absolutely. I'm trying to get a hold of him." And I said, "But also I'd like to talk to you." I said, "I'd like to talk to both of you." And she said, "Well," she says, "we don't want to talk to you." And I said, "Well, you called me." And she said, "But we don't want to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, let me," I said, she said, "If we were going to talk to you, what would we talk about?" And I said, "The only thing I'd want to know is," I said, "how did your meeting Buddy Holly at this crossroads of your career and his career, how did it impact your life?" And she said without hesitation, says, "Buddy Holly ruined my life, ruined my husband's life." I said, "Well, how is that?" And she says, "Oh, the accusations and all the things that came out of it and the lawsuit. It was something that, to this day we still, can't get over." But then she said, "But I'm going to tell you something." She said, "The truth about that flight's never been told. The CAB report, which is the Civil Aeronautics Board, which is the predecessor to the NTSB, she said they got it wrong, and we have proof." And I said, "Well, what do you mean you have proof?" And she says, "We still own the wreckage. We have the wreckage hidden away, and in the wreckage lies the proof. This wasn't our fault. This wasn't my husband's fault. Something happened on that plane, and my husband's going to write about it someday." Well, her husband's in his mid-80s. And I said, "Why don't you let me write about it?" I said, "Tell me about it. Tell me what happened." She said, "No." She says, "We're not going to do that. My husband's going to write about it." And she said, "The only thing I will tell you is we have proof that exonerates my husband. We have proof that plane went down for different reasons, and the CAB got it wrong." Well, she wouldn't talk to me. Well, when you get something like that, I thought, well, wait a minute. I'm a pilot. I have, I'm a lot of years flying, single and twin engine planes. And so I called the NTSB and told them about the conversation I had. And I said, "Can I get a copy of the accident report?" And they said, "Yeah, it's available on the internet. You can get it from several different sources, or you get it from..." So I got the report, read it, called them back, and I said, "If I can get evidence to the contrary, would you guys reopen the investigation?" And they said, "Well, absolutely." They said the CAB has a power, the NTSB has a policy that they never fully close a case, and any new evidence at any time will reopen it. So they said, said this case is no different. And I said, "Well, what do I need?" And they said, "Well, you need proof that we got it wrong." And I said, "Well, how am I going to get that?" And the guy said, he said, "I wouldn't normally suggest this." He said, "But Dick Rodriguez," he says, "just retired from the NTSB." He says, "He was with us for 30 years. And Dick was one of the lead investigators on the nation's biggest air disasters. He was one of the lead investigators on the TWA Flight 100. He's one of our most trusted people." And he said, "If you give Dick a call," he's in Pensacola, Florida, he says, "I bet he's bored." I said, "Okay." So I called Dick Rodriguez, and I said, "Is this Dick Rodriguez?" I said, "You're former with the NTSB?" He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Well," and I told him, I said, "A friend of yours gave me his number, said I should call you." He said, "What?" I said, "We're investigating, a crash." And he says, "Oh, hey, look," he said, "I retired. I'm not doing that anymore." And so I told him what it was, told him what happened, and he said, "Where do we start?" And so Dick, who would be arguably the greatest expert on air disasters in the world, worked with me, and we wrote a couple of chapters about what we believe happened on that flight. And we believe that the conclusion's a little bit different than what the CAB did.
Uh-huh.
But until we can get our hands on the wreckage, which we are trying hard to do, we don't know. But if we can get our hands on that wreckage, if the Dwyers will let us examine it, we might be able to find this truth that the Dwyers claim exists.
Well, if Mr. Dwyer is going to write a book, he better get on it.
Oh, that's exactly what I said to him, and I've talked to people in Mason City that know Dwyers very well off the record, and they said he's not writing any books. Says he's been making this claim of writing a book since 1980, and they said that he has been very open, very vocal. Since 1980, they said he didn't say a word about the crash from 59 to 80, and he said in 1980, all of a sudden, his wife started just yelling and screaming and kind of really almost off the deep end, and they said it never shut up.
Oh, And that was not too long after the movie came out, too.
Yeah, the movie came out in '79, I think.
Yeah. Do you think they really had the wreckage?
Well, I didn't believe they had the wreckage because what happens when there's an aviation disaster, it's just like a car wreck. The insurance company pays off. They get the wreckage.
Oh.
And if you want it, you have to buy it back from them. And I thought, well, if you've ever seen pictures of the wreckage, I've got pictures in the book. All it is basically a ball of aluminum and wire. I mean, this thing is you would never guess it was an airplane. And so why would they buy it? But lo and behold, when you start checking the records, the insurance company paid it off, and then once they were paid off, the Dwyers bought it. So they do have it.
Well, yeah, it looks like some folks might want to display it or something, try to make some money off of it, but I don't know.
In 1980, when he gave one of his very first interviews, he gave it for one of the aviation magazines. I think it was Flying Magazine, but it might not have been. In the article, they said, "Why are you saving this wreckage?" And he says, "Well, at some point, I may want to chop it up and make keychains out of it. I think I could make $1 million." He received a couple of death threats over that, so he retracted that. Said he would never, make keychains. But he did tell a reporter from the Mason City Globe Gazette not very long ago that wreckage was his life insurance policy, and that wreckage is worth more now than every penny he's ever earned in his entire lifetime.
But he's so far not done anything with it, to your knowledge?
No. We are asking listeners, readers everywhere to go to a website that we've set up. It's called Hey Buddy Quest. No spaces. HeyBuddyQuest.com, and there it has some information on the crash, and it asks people to sign a petition. That will. That hopefully at some point we can get enough names on it that we can, use that as leverage and try to either get the NTSB to force the Dwyer's hand on this, or to get the Dwyer's to actually cooperate.
So
that's where that is. That's it's only 3 chapters of the book, but it ended up getting a lot of attention.
Well, you're like the Fox Mulder here, if you're an X-Files fan there.
Yeah.
Well, now, are you a Buddy Holly fan today?
Oh, I am a raging Buddy Holly fan. I feel like a kid. I mean, it's, Buddy, I'm a musician. In fact, I used to play professionally. I played drums for a while with Ray Price and his, in his band. And so I'm an accomplished musician. I've been playing for years. My degree is in music education. And when I listen to Buddy's music, it is so simple but yet so pure. It is so creative for its time that it's just, it is really just amazing.
Yeah.
And he's been recorded and re-recorded over and over and over again. I mean, Linda Ronstadt had a #1 hit with It's So Easy to Fall in Love. James Taylor had a #1 hit with Every Day.
Uh-huh.
The Rolling Stones, their first U.S. hit was Not Fade Away by Buddy Holly. And you go on and on and on. The Grateful Dead have recorded Not Fade Away 7 different times on 7 different albums.
Wow.
So Buddy Holly has been one of the most covered, one of the most re-recorded artists in history. But I'll tell you the thing that's really fascinating, and I get really enthused when I talk about it because I still can't believe it. Digitally enhanced is a word you hear all the time in regard to the old recordings. Digitally remastered, digitally rehanced. They take the old recordings and re-record them, enhance them, remaster them so that they can be played on the radio today. Because all the other because it was so, the recording techniques were so poor back then that when you hear the old recordings, they're just not that good.
Yeah.
Buddy's true genius was as a producer, and Time Life made a statement that when you remaster 1950s recordings, you make them better, all of them except for Buddy Holly. And by remastering them, you actually destroy the quality.
Huh.
He was that good.
I know there's a part in the movie where he's recording a song and then he wants to overdub.
Yeah.
And one of the guys makes a remark like, "Oh, where'd you learn about that?"
Les Paul.
The full title of this book is Hey Buddy, In Pursuit of Buddy Holly, My New Buddy John. I'm assuming that John is the guy who recreated that concert.
John Mueller.
And then My Lost Decade of Music. Now, your Lost Decade, I guess, would be the 50s era? Or
it's really from 59 to 69. That is where I really had zero awareness of rock music, and it's just been, I feel like a kid in the candy store. I feel like a 56-year-old man who's never had sugar in his life, and all of a sudden he's introduced to candy, and that's what it's like listening to all this music. I mean, I have become. Buddy Holly's of course my all-time favorite, but I've become a huge Who fan. I mean, I didn't even know they existed.
Who were they?
They're doing in 1964 was amazing.
Yeah. When I was going to ask, do you think you'll venture into the rock music world again for future subject matter?
Probably not. I'm an obsessive compulsive type personality. Something grabs my interest, and I just absolutely lose my mind while I'm writing about it. And I was that way for a little over a year with Buddy Holly. I mean, it's all I could think of. I was listening to him 24 hours a day, interviewing people, talking to people. I mean, and once that was over with, my interest was really in Buddy Holly, not the music.
Okay.
I was fascinated by his personality, and so I've got a couple other things I'm writing about right now. I'm writing a book called Brimstone, which is going to be made into a movie. It's about a World War II fighter pilot and his really unique war experience. Got a book called Carbon Hill, which is about a turn of the century. A 1908 mining company soccer team with a bunch of 15-year-old miners that, through the strangest quirk of circumstances, they ended up playing the world's champion soccer team from Liverpool, England, and playing them to a 0-0 tie. Mm-hmm. I'm actually looking to do as a Christian artist by the name of Rich Mullins, who was really, I think in some ways you could say he was the Buddy Holly of Christian rock music, and I've been kind of fascinated by his story, so I've been looking into that. But if you're going to write a book, you're going to devote thousands of hours and the better part of a year on kind of an obsessive compulsive quest.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, it's got to hold my interest.
Yeah. When I went to your website, I noticed that you've got another book, Playing with the Enemy.
Yes.
That there may be a movie version of that coming up.
There's a movie coming out. In fact, I just got the release date today. It's set to start filming in September, and it's going to be released because it's a story about my father and my journey to learn about my father. It's going to be released on Father's Day, 2012.
Oh, okay. And your son may have a part in it?
My son's playing my father.
Okay.
My son, Toby Moore, he's an actor, lives and works in Hollywood. He starred in A Separate Piece, played Finney. He starred in Murder in Greenwich. He's in First Daughter. He's been in Law & Order, SVU, CSI Miami. Most people recognize him when they see him, but his name isn't a household name yet. So he's still an actor that's kind of working on his career. But he's going to play the lead in it. So it's really been a fascinating experience and a conversation between generations, because I've written a story about my father, and my son's going to play him in a major motion picture. So it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. Well, now, how can folks get a copy of your book?
Well, they're both available. Playing with the Enemy is available at stores nationwide. And Hey Buddy is available at most stores nationwide. You can also order them from Amazon, BN.com, any of the online venues. And I hope people take a look. I think that the reviews on both books have been excellent, and they've been really, really well accepted. And I think that people will be surprised as they read them.
Well, I'm sure anybody who reads your book, whether they're a Buddy Holly fan or not, is going to learn something. Because if they're just going from the Buddy Holly story, then a lot of that stuff is going to be really new to them.
Yeah, most of the people who have read and reviewed my book, and the ones that seem to just absolutely embrace it and love it, were not Buddy Holly fans. So it's not something that is required to be a Buddy Holly fan. Everyone can kind of take that journey of learning about Buddy with me.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't catch up with you before now. I know your book has actually been out since the first of the year. How did that book tour go that you
Oh, it went real well. It was interesting. We were on the road in Texas when they had the big snowstorm, and so a lot of our events were canceled. And I was stuck in a hotel in Dallas for a while. But overall, it was great. I mean, we were talking to packed crowds and bookstores all over the country, and it was really a blessing. We enjoyed it. It was great, and it's ongoing. I mean, it's still a book's not like a movie. A movie is released, and a couple of weeks later, it's gone. The life of a book is different unless you are a consistent New York Times bestselling author. The book continues to grow. My book, Playing with the Enemy, has been out 5 years. In first quarter this year, it enjoyed its best quarter in sales. So it continues through word of mouth to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. Hey Buddy, it's gotten off to a good start, strong start, but every month it gets better. So it continues to grow. If people want to learn more about both books, they can go to heybuddybook.com to learn about Hey Buddy. If they want to learn about Playing with the Enemy, they can go to playingwiththeenemy.com.
Okay.
We'll take a look.
Well, all right. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
Let us know what's coming down the road sometime.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. That was Gary W. Moore, author of Hey Buddy, available in bookstores everywhere.